Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Todd Field. All right, we're going to trade spots. This is good.
I've been here before. This is the good chair.
Yeah. Well, Todd, it's first of all, congratulations on everything this season. So exciting to have a new Todd Field film, to have it be this amazing, and to get to talk to you. I want to begin by asking if you can share your journey to filmmaking is unusual. I mean, you were at one point, I think, pursuing jazz. Then you were an actor heading in that direction, and we can note you were in Woody Allen's Radio Days, the movie Twister, even Stanley Kubrick's last film, Eyes Wide Shut. And then at some point, there's a pivot to directing. What brought that about?
How far back do I go? I don't want to bore you guys.
No.
I mean, I started out, yes, I started out like a lot of people as a child, obsessed with close-up magic, and then I discovered girls, and and then I started, playing music, and that's really what I wanted to do. And I got a job in high school at a second-run movie house, and I ran 6 projectors every night, and I kind of fell in love with movies. But I would never have been so bold as to imagine that I would ever be able to be involved with the making of films. And I went to school on a music scholarship, and then I followed a girl into the theater, and then changed my major and started being in plays and et cetera, et cetera. And then I moved to New York, and pretty quickly I thought, I said there were a lot of young people my age who were making films at NYU and places like that, and I would volunteer on these projects just so that I could get close to the camera. And I remember the New York Film Festival was on when I first moved to the city, and somebody shoved me across the street and said, "Those are films," And I never heard anyone call movies films before, and I learned very quickly what they were talking about. That year, the first year, was the Coens' first movie, Blood Simple, Jim Jarmusch's Stranger, then Paradise. There was a Truffaut retrospective, and many, many others. And that was kind of mind-blowing because the vernacular for those films were so different than what I was sort of accustomed to experiencing. So yeah, I acted for about 5 years. I moved out. Went up to Canada, played some hockey, wanted to open a Mexican restaurant, was going to import tequila for the first time into the province of Quebec. And then...
Can I just pause you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I don't know if sometimes there's BS on the internet. I don't know if this is true, but I was a big baseball card collector as a kid. I have heard, maybe this is absolutely, if it's not true, this is going to be insane. Are you the reason that there was gum in baseball card packs? Was there something about?
No.
That was reported to be.
No, that started before we were born.
No, but I mean, there's something with Big League Chew or something.
Yeah, well, that's different. It's in a pouch.
But it was something about, it was related
but
to
that's,
anyway,
that's
we won't go there, but it's not, at least it's not totally.
We digress. I'm trying to get up to the pivot points.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go past the tequila. Anyway, so somebody said that I should come out here and test for a film, and I came out here, and I met this young woman that turned out to be my wife, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going back to open this Mexican restaurant, and I'm importing tequila." And she said, "You're not a serious person." And I said, "What do you mean?" I think I'm really serious about the tequila. And she said, "No, if you really want to be involved in film, you need to be here." And she was very convincing. And so I moved here, and I did work in film for maybe 4 years, 5 years. But the whole time I had this sort of secret dream that I would enroll at the American Film Institute and become a fellow there. And I'd made a couple of films with Carl Franklin, who you know, who did Devil in the Blue Dress and many other films. A fine filmmaker, good friend. And he was at the AFI, and he really pushed me in, and because they didn't want to take me. It was really owing to Carl that I got into AFI. So I quit acting. Serena, my wife, was supporting our household to get us through school. We had a young child at home, and the last film that I made before I went into school was by this wonderful filmmaker, Victor Nunez, who actually had a film here last Saturday. That film, while I was in school, went to the Sundance Film Festival, along with a short that I had made, and it won the Grand Jury Prize. And so I had no acting agent, I had no plans on acting, but as I came out of film school, my phone kept ringing for these movies you're talking about, like Twister and Walking and Talking with Nicole Hollison, her first movie, and then ultimately with Stanley Kubrick. Now, some of those jobs I took because I had to contribute to my household and chip away at my student loans. And the job with Stanley, obviously, I would have taken out loans to go and done. So.
Well, it's an amazing story, and AFI is now very happy to claim you as one of theirs. They're rightly so. But they just had the AFI Awards luncheon, and you were the toast of the lunch to have an alumnus who's gone on to such great things. But one of the things I wonder is, does that background in acting have anything to do you think, with your effectiveness at working with actors? I want to just note that you have directed 6 actors to Oscar-nominated performances. We had Tom Wilkinson, Sissy Spacek, and Marissa Tomei for In the Bedroom, Kate Winslet and Jackie Earle Haley for Little Children, and now Kate for Tar. I guess, do you think that having some understanding of what they do helps you to work better with them?
I don't know. I don't know. I know there are certain. Sometimes I think our jobs are subtractive. It's about what you don't do. I was very lucky to work with some incredible filmmakers. And to pay attention to what they did that was effective and maybe not so effective, and why things worked. And then filmmakers where I see they had trouble, and I could see why they were having trouble. And that's a really sort of privileged position to be in as a student of film, to be able to see different people's processes. As for how I speak to my actors or they speak to me, I think it's important to a point, but every actor is different, and they may not care about what I care about. Generally, I try to create an environment where the actors are the main focus, and they should be the main focus. I think there's a lot of, but I've seen people experience trouble, which is where they get obsessed with the mechanics of filmmaking. They get obsessed with the mechanics of a schedule and a production, and they don't realize that at the end of the day, we're going to watch these people on screen, and that we should have an environment to where these people on screen can go about their business, and that they shouldn't be expected to be behaving like the key grip. That's not what they do. They have a different job, and you may not think that they're preparing, but they are preparing. A lot of times, I think in filmmaking, you say action and you say cut. And after cut, everybody gets really noisy on a set. But cut is where you make the film. After cut, that's when you figure out, okay, what just happened and how can we change it? And that conversation can be very quiet, it can be internal, or it can be in dialogue with your actors. And so that's the main thing. Between cut and action, I think, is the main thing.
Wow. Yeah. Given that, tonight's Directors' Night here at the festival, I imagine that we have, and I know for a fact, we have a number of filmmakers and aspiring filmmakers here in the audience. And I think that, on the one hand, they're seeing you and Martin tonight on one of the, at a exciting moment in both of your lives and careers. But I think that it's important to also acknowledge, like, this is a challenge, can be a challenging, frustrating business. And I mean, I wonder if you, just because I've heard you speak really powerfully about this before, the fact that we didn't get to see a Todd Field feature between 2006's Little Children and 2022's Tar wasn't because you were sleeping in. It was because it's hard to get movies made in the way that you want to get them made, right? Can you talk about some of what you were up against in those years?
I think that this is something that all filmmakers have to face. It's a challenge for all of us. I don't think that I'm a special case, I think that my circumstances were sort of informed by the fact that after making Little Children, I had this sort of epiphany that I had just been on the floor crawling around with these 2, 3.5-year-olds, Sadie and Ty, for months. And I called Serena and I said, wouldn't it be great if we could just do it one more time? Because we had 3 older children, one of them was going off to school overseas, et cetera, and so when I went out onto the road, I was out selling the film in Japan with my older son. She called me up and she said, "You got your wish." So I think I set my sights pretty high and set the circumstances, around the height of those sites, because I understand production and I understand what's a reasonable amount of support that you need to be able to execute, and so it was easy to say no to a lot of stuff. It wasn't even so much that I said, that others said no. Sometimes that did happen, but sometimes I said no just because the cards weren't right and I wasn't going to play them. I'd rather stay home and be the Little League coach of my son. I mean, we won the championship and there was no 12-year-olds on our team, and no one had ever done that in a 5-town Little League before.
Well, it's great that your return to feature filmmaking was a project that I know, it seems like from everything I could gather, you are as passionate about as anything you've done here with Tar. So I've got to ask you, when did the idea first occur to you? And before you even put it into script form, I know a lot of work went on even before that. We said you have some background in music, but this is upper echelons of symphony orchestras. I don't know. I'm curious how much that world you even knew about yourself before you dove into this.
Not much. Yeah. Not much. I mean, I was just asked by some student journalists on the way in here about that, the same thing. And they were saying, who do you think, is there a person that was your guiding light in doing this? And it's funny. Student journalist is the first person to ask me that question. It's a very good question. And I think that would be Leonard Bernstein, and I think that that had been, like many people, I think I had been really seduced by him because he was such an incredible advocate for concert music. But that was a very long time ago. And when I started this in March 2020, I had this character sort of built in a notebook, but I didn't know where to put her. And Peter Kujawski and Kiska Higgs and Scott Lambert had come to me and said, we want to make a film about a conductor. Would you be interested in doing that? I thought, okay, sure, yeah, of course. And I didn't pitch the story to them. I just said, I'll do it, but you just have to trust me. And they said, okay, which is remarkable.
I was going to say, you say that doesn't happen, right?
It never happens. And so I knew at the beginning that she was the kind of character that I wanted to meet and understand that she really, really knew her stuff. And I think that was important in terms of catching that character at the beginning and sort of going with her, It's not like there's going to be a test at the end of the movie. We don't need to know this stuff, but we need to know that she does. So it was the beginning of the lockdown, and I called up Mike Knobloch and Natalie Hayden at Universal Music, and I said, do you know anyone that I could talk to, a conductor? Because they were siloed like the rest of us. They couldn't go to work. And they said, well, there's this guy, John Mauceri. And I said, I just read one of his books. And I said, do you think he'd talk to me? And they said, yeah. Well, it turned out John Mauceri was Leonard Bernstein's assistant for 19 years. So John, John's a great conductor. He taught at Yale. He's written several books, which if you have any interest, I would highly recommend that you read. But he also had conducted movie nights for the LA Phil at the Hollywood Bowl for many, many years. And so he'd been around films. And he wasn't, as I would learn later, that when you talk to people, because classical music is a little bit like academia, like it informs life, but it's really outside of life. And there are very particular kind of rules, secret signs and handshakes and things. And they get very nervous if you ask them certain questions often, And movie people we're weird. We're like the clowns that come in and the termites, they're right to be dubious of us, So, but John had been around it, and he understood film, so I could ask him questions. I didn't tell him what the film was about. I didn't say that it was, I just said, there's this conductor, and I want to do this little move with the cellist. Would that ever happen? And he might say, well, no, not exactly, but maybe this, or maybe that, or maybe the other thing. So I had about, I had several weeks with John on the telephone, and they were very, very fruitful. So I came out of that sort of master class with him. And once I started writing, it came, 12 weeks later, I had the script. It was done.
I think one of the things you talked about with him was Mahler's Fifth, right?
Yeah.
Because this is obviously, if you've seen the movie, central to the movie, but when you discussed it with him, it sounds like it was almost, you were ashamed to say that was a piece of music?
Yeah, well, I told him, I said, look, she's completing, or I didn't say she, I never said it was a woman, I just said, there's this conductor. I hadn't told anyone except for my wife, so I said, this conductor has got this thing that they're completing, this sort of, essentially a cycle of an arc of one particular composer. What should it be? And he said, well, what's your favorite piece of classical music? And I said, well, you're going to laugh, And he said, no, what is it? Why are you being so sheepish? I said, it's Mahler's Fifth Symphony. He said, no one who is serious about concert music would ever be cynical about Mahler's Fifth Symphony, and let me tell you why. And then he started to unpack it. And he had just conducted it recently, and it was incredible. He's an incredible student of that piece. And he's like, well, it starts out with a funeral march, right? Then there's a storm, Then there's a sort of love song, and it was perfect. It was absolutely meant for this film. Like it was like just sitting there, So yeah. I owe that to John too.
The other thing that's, pretty striking, you've said you would not have made this movie without Cate Blanchett signing on to play Lydia Tarr once you decided you wanted it to be a female conductor. What was did you know Cate Blanchett? Was that like...
I knew, yeah, Cate and I met, I guess about roughly 10 years before I started the script. We'd met in New York City. Joan Didion and I had written a script together, and we very much wanted Cate to play the role, and she agreed to play the role. We had a very long meeting with her. And then sadly, and this is often the case, if you want to ask like certain projects that didn't happen, we just couldn't get the money because they said, oh, well, if you had an actor in this role, we would give you X. But with, if it's an actress, even Cate Blanchett, we would only give you Y. Well, none of us wanted to make that version of the film, so it never happened. But I finished, that experience. The takeaway was I had just sat with really one of the great minds I had ever come in contact with, and somebody that really was so exciting to talk about story with, because when she looks at a piece of material, perhaps because of her theatrical background, she looks at the whole thing, how all of it works. She's not just focused on Lydia Tarr, or she's not focused on this other project that Joan and I were talking about. She wants to understand all of it. So that was tremendous. I mean, Kate literally showed up, on the first day of rehearsal, and she had memorized the entire script as if it was Hamlet. And I'm not talking about just the dialogue of everyone. She knew all the stage directions. I've never seen anything like that.
And learned German, conducting.
And learned German, and learned how to play Bach on the piano, and learned to conduct, and learned how to stunt drive, and had an American dialect, and on.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, amazing things. Yeah.
Well, that kind of begs the question, which I saw somebody else ask you recently, and I thought it was a good one. How much of your job with Cate Blanchett is guiding her performance versus just letting her loose?
How much credit should I take for Cate Blanchett? Are you taping this? Because she's very active on the internet. Again, the student journalists asked me this on the inside, like, what is directing? And I think it's a really funny thing. I think, Martin, it'd be interesting to say, you should ask Martin that question too. I don't really, the division of labor is a kind of a dodgy proposition. There's certain things we all have to do, but at the end of the day, a director and an actor are people. And they're talking, and they're trying to be prepared enough, but nimble enough to be at the pitch of perception to make very, very tiny adjustments with each other, and that's ongoing, and that starts early on. In this case, it started 9 months before we were even on the ground together in Berlin. We'd talk every night when she got home from work, and it continued all the way through post, and that's a dialogue. It's no different than if you were sitting down and writing something together. And she's formidable, and she's a very, very exciting dance partner. Let me just put it that way.
Totally. One of the things that we spoke about when she was here a week ago, and you were here as well for that evening, the reality of the world of symphony orchestras at that top echelon is that there are not women in that role, right? There has never been. And so I wonder, the fact that you chose to have that protagonist in that position be a woman essentially in a man's world, not saying that's the way it should be or whatever, but that's the reality, and then she gets into things that we've predominantly seen men get caught up in recent years, some of the behavior. Was any of that so that the audience maybe looks at that kind of a situation, which again we've all seen for the last few years, in a different way? Does it having a female protagonist in that in that kind of well, you get where I'm going.
Yeah. So in short, yes, but let's start with the men getting into trouble in the last few years. Men have been into trouble for the last few thousand years.
Yep.
We're just hearing about it
right.
in the last few years.
Right.
So, why have men been getting into trouble? Well, men have held power, simple as that. So, I mean, this thing that Kate and I wanted to build is really about power, and we wanted to examine power, and we wanted to understand the complicity of power and how that works. Nobody's up there alone. They're there by the grace of others, and they're there because there are winks and nods, and there's complicity, and there's payola, and there's all kinds of favors and things like that go on. And so how do you look at that thing? How do you look at the ugly stick of power? And whoever holds it, it's going to corrupt them. Well, if it was a man, as you say, I know how I'm supposed to feel about that. I would turn off. I wouldn't be looking at power. I'd just be looking at the man and saying, that's how we all are conditioned to feel, because unfortunately that's what's been going on for most of human history. So how do you get past that? Well, it's not a man, you know. There was something else that was really important, which was, you know, there's this, you know, I think the problem with when you're looking at something that you're trying to accomplish, and you're saying, okay, at the end of the day, you know, God likes a masquerade. You know, we're in the pretend business. This is not a documentary. And as you say, insofar as there has never been a chief female conductor of any of the so-called Big Five American orchestras ever, there has never been a female conductor as a chief conductor, a guest conductor, yes, but never as a chief conductor of any major German orchestra ever. This is a fairy tale, you know, and as a fairy tale, it's meant to do this one particular thing, which is to look at power.
It leaves, yeah. So much more we could get into. It really is as thought-provoking as any movie I can think of, and we will talk more about it in a little bit when we have Todd rejoin us. But first, I'm going to introduce a clip of our next guest, and then we'll do the shuffle. But hang tight for one sec. And our next guest is one of a small handful of people who have ever operated at the very top of both the theater world and the film world. For the extraordinary plays that he has written over the last 27 years, since he was in his mid-20s, he has won 3 Olivier Awards and been nominated for 5 Tony Awards. For his films, he has won 4 Golden Globe Awards, 4 BAFTA Awards, and 1 Academy Award, which came for his directorial debut, the 2004 short film Six Shooter, and he has been nominated for 6 other Oscars. He received Best Original Screenplay Oscar nominations for 2008's In Bruges, 2017's 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and 2022's The Banshees of Inisherin, the last 2 of which were also nominated for Best Picture, while Banshees, the story of 2 men on an island off the coast of Ireland whose close friendship is suddenly ended by one of them, has brought him as well the first directing nomination of his career. Let's take a look at the screen work of Martin McDonagh.